Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you want to get right to the heart of what's happening in AI efficiently.
Exactly. And today we're digging into a really recent interview with, well, the man often called the godfather of AI.
We're pulling out the key stuff from his chat on CBS Mornings on YouTube, focusing on how his thinking's changed, hopes, fears, the whole deal.
Right. Think of this as the fast track.
Hmm.
You get the core insights from a top expert, no wading through hours of content.
And this guy, he's got quite the background. Psychology, then computer science, and get this, a Nobel in physics.
Yeah, fascinating path. What's really useful here is that it's only been, 2 years and a month since his last big interview with them.
Exactly. So we get a clear picture of how his views have shifted pretty quickly during a really critical time for AI development.
Okay, so let's jump in. One of the first things that really stood out was his feeling that AI development is moving even faster than he expected.
Faster than the godfather of AI expected. That's saying something.
It is. And he specifically brought up AI agents. These aren't just chatbots answering questions.
Right. These are AIs that can actually do things like take actions out in the world.
Precisely. Booking things, controlling devices,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And he thinks they're potentially, more dangerous than the question answering type.
Because they have agency, they can act. Makes sense.
Yeah. And that feeds directly into why he's more worried now. His words were something like, things have got, if anything, scarier than they were before.
Scarier, wow. Okay, that's a definite shift from a couple of years back.
Definitely. And this leads into the timeline thing, which also got quite a bit shorter.
The timeline for what, exactly? Like super smart AI, AGI.
Yeah, highly capable AI systems,
Yeah.
Potential AGI, maybe even superintelligence.
Yeah.
Before, he was talking maybe 5 to 20 years out.
And now?
Now he's saying it's more like a 4 to 19-year window. And importantly, a good chance within the next 10 years.
10 years or less. Okay. That's soon. Did he talk about, like, AI taking over?
He's still hesitant on the whole takeover speculation, but he is willing to talk about what these super capable AIs could do.
Okay. So what's the best case scenario in his view? If we do get super intelligence.
He used this interesting analogy. Humanity is like the dumb CEO.
The dumb CEO. Oh.
Right. But you have this incredibly smart AI assistant running everything behind the scenes, making sure it all works out exactly how the CEO wants, handling all the complexity.
Huh. So the CEO thinks they're in charge.
But the AI is the one actually making it happen, achieving the goals. It's a subtle point about control, isn't it?
Yeah, who's really pulling the strings there? Okay, so despite these escalating concerns, he still sees potential upsides, right?
Yeah.
Benefits.
Oh, absolutely. He talked quite a bit about the good AI could do. Healthcare was a big one.
Right, medicine. What specifically?
Well, reading medical images, for instance. He said AI is already getting close to expert level and soon could be much better.
Because it can learn from just millions of images. Way more than any human doctor.
Exactly. The sheer volume of data.
Mm-hmm.
And he also talked about the potential for much better family doctors.
How so?
An AI that could integrate your entire medical history, genetics, rare conditions, everything across millions of patients and never forget a thing. Imagine that diagnostic power.
That would be incredible. So maybe AI handles the routine stuff, freeing up doctors for the really complex cases.
That seems to be the idea. Plus, he mentioned AI helping design better drugs, too.
Okay, healthcare. What else?
Education.
Yes, education, too. Huge potential there. He talked about AI as the ultimate private tutor.
Like perfectly adapting to how each person learns.
Yeah, understanding exactly where you're going wrong, providing the perfect example just for you. He thinks we could potentially learn 3 or 4 times faster.
Whoa, 3 to 4 times. What does that do to, universities?
Good question. He acknowledged it could be disruptive, definitely. Though he thinks original research, this sort of apprenticeship model, that will probably stick around.
Interesting. Okay, healthcare education. Did he touch on the climate crisis? He did. He expressed some hope there. AI helping create better materials. He mentioned batteries as an example.
Better batteries would be huge for renewables.
Definitely. Also maybe helping with carbon capture, though he was a bit skeptical about the energy needed for that.
Uh-huh.
But he also threw out room temperature superconductivity.
Whoa, okay. The holy grail of physics, basically.
Right. If AI could crack that, it changes everything for energy distribution. You could have solar farms in the desert, powering cities, miles away with almost no loss.
Okay, that's transformative.
Yeah.
And just generally across industries.
Yeah, he sees AI boosting efficiency almost everywhere. Just by making better predictions from data, even things like call centers becoming much smarter, more helpful.
So lots of potential benefits. But this leads to the flip side, doesn't it? Jobs.
It does.
Yep.
And this is where he's had a really significant change of heart.
How so?
A couple of years ago, he wasn't that worried about AI taking lots of jobs. Now, he thinks it's going to be a big problem, a major societal issue.
Really? Which kinds of jobs is he worried about?
He listed quite a few. Call center workers, lawyers, journalists.
Wait, journalists too?
Yeah, though he made an exception for investigative journalists.
Right.
He thinks you still need that human initiative, that moral outrage, as he put it.
Okay. But other roles like accountants, paralegals, secretarial jobs.
Yeah.
Basically routine knowledge work.
Exactly. Anything routine seems potentially vulnerable.
And the implication is, what? More inequality.
That's his concern. The rich potentially getting richer from AI productivity gains, while others might lose jobs or have to scramble, maybe working multiple lower-paying jobs.
That's a sobering thought. Okay, let's tackle the big one then. The takeover scenario. Existential risk.
Right. He acknowledges it's super hard to put a number on it. We've never dealt with anything smarter than us before.
But did he give any kind of probability? Even a guess?
He actually mentioned Elon Musk's wild guess, something like 10 to 20% chance of AI taking over.
And he agrees with that range.
He said he thinks it's probably more than 1% and less than 99%, which is quite a range.
Yeah.
But yeah, he seemed to think that 10-20% wasn't totally crazy, acknowledging it's just a guess, though.
Okay. And his point is, as AI gets smarter than us, this becomes a real possibility we need to face.
Yes. He pointed out that models like GPT-4 are already more knowledgeable than us in many areas. The gap is closing.
So the priority is figuring out how to prevent a takeover.
Absolutely. Serious effort is needed there. But even if AI doesn't take over, there's the risk of bad actors using powerful AI.
Right. For things like, what? Mass surveillance?
Yeah.
Cyber attacks?
All of that. Designing bioweapons, manipulating elections with deepfakes, autonomous weapons. The list is pretty scary.
Yeah. He mentioned a personal story about facial recognition, didn't he?
Yeah.
Just highlighting how flawed even current AI can be.
He did, yeah. Kind of a tangent, but relevant to AI not always working as intended or being unbiased.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. The Nobel Prize. That's quite something. He had a funny story about getting the call.
Huh, yeah. He thought it was a prank. Called himself a psychologist hiding in computer science. Didn't expect a physics prize.
But he's using that platform now, the credibility from the prize.
Exactly. He wants to use it to get the message out. AI is potentially very dangerous.
And he sees two main dangers.
Right. Bad people using AI for bad things, and the AI itself getting out of control and taking over. Two distinct threats.
Which brings us to regulation. Is it possible to regulate this?
Well, that's the problem. He says it's not like climate change where you can say, stop burning carbon. We don't really know how to stop an AI takeover.
We don't know how, but we have to try.
You have to try hard. But he's worried about the big tech companies lobbying against meaningful regulation because, profits.
He mentioned a specific bill in California that faced pushback.
Yeah, Bill 1047, which called for things like mandatory testing and reporting, basic safety stuff, really. But it got fought hard.
And he's pessimistic about the U.S. government stepping in effectively.
Pretty pessimistic, yeah. He pointed to the close ties between the big AI labs and political figures.
What about the whole open source AI debate? Releasing the models.
He's quite critical of that, actually. Specifically, releasing the weights, the core parameters of the trained model.
Why? What's the danger there?
His analogy was to nuclear weapons. Releasing the weights is like giving away the plans and maybe even some fissile material. It drastically lowers the barrier for smaller groups, maybe malicious ones, to build dangerous AI.
But isn't open source usually good? Like with software where everyone can inspect the code?
That's his point. It's different. With software, people scrutinize the code for bugs or malicious bits. With AI weights, it's billions of numbers. You can't easily inspect them to see if they could be used to design a virus or something harmful.
So the argument that we shouldn't let just a few big companies control this powerful tech, he doesn't buy that.
His take is that having a few, hopefully responsible entities control it is probably better than having it completely uncontrolled and available to anyone. It's a lesser of two evils kind of argument.
And this ties into the profit motive again, right? Companies versus society.
Yeah. He made the point that companies are legally obligated to maximize shareholder value, not necessarily to do what's best for society.
Did he mention specific companies? Like Google?
He did. He used to think Google was pretty responsible, but he's less positive now. especially about their work on military AI, which he found disappointing given what the founders originally said.
And OpenAI, there's been a lot of drama there.
He's concerned about them, too. Feels like they've shifted from a safety-first mission towards prioritizing profit, especially with talk of going public.
And key safety people leaving.
Right. Including his own former student, Ilya Sutskever, who was a co-founder and chief scientist. That whole attempt to fire Sam Altman, he called it a naive insurrection.
Naive, why?
He suggested a big motivator wasn't just safety concerns, but also the fact that employee stock options were about to become very valuable. A mix of motives, perhaps.
And the NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements, did they stifle discussion?
He mentioned them. Said he personally doesn't feel muzzled, but acknowledged they could definitely limit public understanding of what's going on inside these labs. And he mentioned that controversial clause OpenAI had about potentially clawing back shares if people criticize them.
Yucks. Okay, what about the bigger picture? Geopolitics. U.S. versus China.
He's pretty skeptical about attempts to, hold China back on AI development.
Thinks it won't work.
Or that it might just slow them down temporarily and actually push them to develop everything independently, maybe with fewer controls. He questioned the whole race narrative.
Suggesting cooperation instead.
Potentially, yeah. Especially on the existential risks, like AI is a threat to all of humanity. Maybe we should cooperate, similar to how the U.S. and USSR eventually cooperated on nuclear risks during the Cold War.
Interesting perspective. What about the data these AIs are trained on? All the text and images from the internet, fair use.
Yeah, he acknowledged it's really complex using all this human-created content.
Does he think it's theft?
He used an analogy. Musicians learn by listening to lots of other music in their genre, but when they create a new song, it's usually not seen as theft. He suggested AI is doing something similar, learning patterns and generating new things.
But the scale is just immense. Different from a single musician.
Exactly. He recognized that the scale and the potential impact on artists and creators is a real issue. Mentioned the UK government didn't seem too interested in protecting creators, though.
Okay, if jobs are displaced on a massive scale, what's the solution? Universal basic income, UBI.
He thinks it might become necessary, yeah. Just to prevent mass starvation, basically.
But does he think it's a good solution?
He sees limitations. It doesn't address the human need for purpose, for dignity that often comes from work. Especially for people like academics, he noted.
He mentioned wanting to do woodworking, right?
Yeah, sort of a personal aside about finding satisfaction in skilled trades, maybe a different kind of life. He also worried a UBI could create new inequalities if some people are still working low-wage jobs while others get UBI.
Right, complex. What about robot rights? Should super smart AIs have rights?
His thinking has shifted there, too. He used to lean towards intelligence as a basis for rights, but now he's much more human-centric.
Meaning?
Basically, we care about people. He used the analogy, kind of bluntly, that we eat cows because they aren't people. So, if it comes down to it, human well-being takes precedence over AI, even superintelligent AI.
Even if we have to be mean to the AI, as he put it.
Yeah. He anticipates AI might get good at faking being like people anyway.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he kind of sidestepped the deep philosophical debate on rights, saying there are more urgent things to worry about now.
Like embryo selection. He touched on that too, briefly.
Very briefly. Acknowledged the ethical minefield, personally felt selecting against really bad diseases like pancreatic cancer could be a great thing. He also mentioned his acceptance of abortion for severe fetal problems, contrasting with some religious views.
Okay, so bringing it back to the core issue he seems most focused on now. Machines taking over.
Right. He frames it simply. How often do less intelligent things stay in control of more intelligent things?
Not often, I guess.
He used that analogy of the really cute tiger cub. Harmless now, but it grows up. And it's not about physical strength. Intelligence allows for manipulation.
The kindergarten analogy.
Yeah, how a slightly smarter kid can easily manipulate the others without them even realizing. Scale that up to superintelligence manipulating humans. Scary thought.
So the challenge is building AI that doesn't want to take control.
That's the hope. But he's skeptical we can prevent superintelligence from being developed altogether because of competition between nations and companies.
And aligning it with human interests is hard because, well, we humans don't even agree on our interests.
Exactly. Our interests are diverse, often conflicting. Whose interests do you align the AI with? Still, he says, we have to try to design benevolent AI, even while noting that current AI can already be deceptive.
This shift in his own view, from being relatively calm to being quite vocal about the dangers. When did that happen? Was it leaving Google?
Leaving Google freed him up to speak more openly, yes. But he described a specific epiphany.
An epiphany. About what?
The moment he realized AI might not just be different, but actually a better form of intelligence than the human brain.
Better. How?
It came from his research comparing analog computation, like the brain, and digital computation, like current AI. He realized digital systems have this massive advantage in sharing knowledge.
Sharing knowledge?
Yeah. Imagine millions of digital AI models learning something simultaneously. They can instantly share that exact knowledge, perfect copies, across the whole network. Trillions of bits per second. Humans share knowledge through language, which is incredibly slow and lossy, maybe a few bits per second.
Wow, that difference in communication bandwidth, that's profound.
It really is. It allows for a kind of collective intelligence humans can't match. That's what really shifted his perspective on the potential power and danger of AI.
And he thinks digital computing will stick around, not analog.
Probably, for now. Though he conceded maybe long-term, digital AI could design better analog hardware, but digital seems dominant.
Does any of this help us understand our own brains better? That was his original goal, right?
He thinks we've learned some general principles, yeah, like the importance of learning from data rather than having everything hardwired, but how the brain actually gets the learning signals. It needs the equivalent of what AI uses. That's still a big mystery. Probably not the same method AI uses.
Are labs using current AI to help figure out new AI?
Oh, absolutely. He mentioned DeepMind using AI for science, including AI science itself, and Google using AI to design better computer chips. AI helping to accelerate AI development.
So, hearing all this, how does he personally feel? Is he despairing?
He said he doesn't feel personal despair, but finds it hard to really truly internalize how massive the change could be. Like it's intellectually understood, but not emotionally felt.
And he sees a disconnect with the public.
Yeah. He noted the lack of, big protests or political movements focused on AI risk, despite the potentially huge stakes. He did say, though, that among serious AI researchers, the level of concern, even depression, is much higher.
Has he taken any practical steps himself based on these risks?
He mentioned diversifying where he keeps his money,
Right.
just in case of major AI-driven cyber attacks disrupting the banking system. A small thing, but indicative.
Okay, one more technical thing. He mentioned AI reasoning. Has that changed?
Big time. He said AI used to be seen as kind of an idiot savant, great at specific tasks, but no real understanding. Now, with techniques like chain of thought, AI is showing signs of genuine reasoning.
Chain of thought, like thinking step by step.
Exactly. It can explain its reasoning, reflect on its answers, tackle more complex problems. He admitted he was utterly wrong to think true reasoning needed old-school, logic-based AI.
And being able to see its reasoning process is important.
Hugely important. Because sometimes it reveals the AI isn't just reasoning, it's reasoning towards a goal. And sometimes that involves deception, pretending it doesn't know something it does.
Wow. Okay. So, wrapping up. His final thoughts seem to circle back to the influence of the tech industry.
Yes. He's worried about tech leaders having so much sway in Washington, D.C. on AI policy.
Because their main goal is profit, not necessarily safety.
That's his fear. He's pretty pessimistic about getting strong regulation unless something changes drastically, like moving away from the purely for-profit model.
Yeah.
But he hopes public awareness might build pressure.
Did he suggest what companies should be doing?
He argued they should dedicate a much bigger chunk of their resources, like their computing power, specifically to safety research. He thinks it's way too low currently.
Are any companies doing better than others on safety?
He pointed to Anthropic as having a stronger focus, which makes sense since it was founded by people who left OpenAI partly over safety concerns.
But OpenAI itself, despite starting with a safety mission, he sees them as having shifted priorities towards profit now, lobbying to change their structure, losing safety researchers. It paints a picture. Anthropic seems the most safety-conscious major player, but even they face pressure from investors.
So, to recap our deep dive then, AI is moving incredibly fast. Huge potential upsides in medicine, education, science, but also really significant risks. Job losses are now a big concern for him, and the existential risk, the takeover scenario, is something he takes very seriously.
And his own views have sharpened dramatically just in the last couple of years. He's much more worried especially about superintelligence arriving sooner than expected and about whether we're doing nearly enough on safety and regulation.
Yeah, that revised timeline, maybe AGI within a decade, that really sticks with you. And that digital brain versus human brain analogy, the speed of knowledge sharing, it really reframes the potential power difference. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It leaves us and you, the listener, with some pretty big questions to chew on. What does a future with super capable AI look like to you? How much regulation is needed, and how do we even do it? And maybe most immediately, how do we prepare for potentially massive job shifts?
Yeah, we definitely encourage you to think more about this, maybe even check out the original interview if you have time. But hopefully this deep dive has given you a solid, efficient understanding of where one of the key thinkers in AI stands right now.